Hi everyone, my name is Eloïse Forestier and I'm very happy to introduce you to my new project today. I'm going to set up the PowerPoint right now. So here we are, this is my presentation today for the ESPRit conference. And so I am going to look at this new project with you, Periodicals as Vectors of Cultural Transfer, the French and British Roots of Swedish Feminism in late 19th century Swedish periodicals. So this is a transnational study of the development of early feminism in these periodicals. And I am going to inquire into what Swedish feminism actually means and where it comes from. I have two research hypotheses, which I am going to emphasize straight away. The first is that Swedish feminism did not develop independently, but was built through foreign influences, more specifically French and British ones. And the second is that as foreign input was integrated into the public debate, Swedish feminism developed different views linked to a variety of issues such as women's place in society, women's work, morality, religion, politics. And by testing these hypotheses, I would like to debunk two common misconceptions which we tend to have today. The first is this kind of mythical aura that envelops the term Swedish feminism, at least from a European point of view. It's seen by other Europeans as perhaps a foreign role model, unattainable because inherently Swedish. I'd like to say no. I would like to prove with my work here that Europe is an interconnected space, to show it really. And that Swedish feminism is also to a certain extent European feminism. The second one, which is perhaps less marked, is that all Swedes would be having the same opinion on feminism. They would all march together towards a single feminist goal. But it's much more nuanced than this. From an insider's view, we deal with feminisms in the plural sense. We discuss how to make, for instance, society more gender equal. We speak of different schools of feminism, which are now strongly attached to political colors. This is probably the main disconnect between a foreigner's view of Swedish feminism and a Swedish view of Swedish feminism or of feminism in general. I'm going to argue that by looking at late 19th century periodicals over a period of several decades, we can make sense of how Swedish feminism developed into different schools of thought by tracing the British and French roots of the debates. My talk today will be divided into two parts based respectively on context and content. In the first, I will present two major Swedish feminist periodicals that are placed at two extremes of the spectrum of ideas on feminism. The bourgeois Tidskrift för Hemmet, which you see here on the left of the screen, and the radical left-wing Framåt, which you see on the right. And for my second part, we're going to open and read these periodicals together. I will show you an example for each of them in the form of an article that shows how British and French sources influenced the debate on Swedish feminism, but also to show you a little bit how my research is going on at this stage. So starting with this first part, I was recently asked how Swedish feminism relates to the themes of socialism, sexuality, which are three rather integrated themes in sort of the public consciousness, especially concerning Swedish feminism. How do they affect one another? Did feminism come before? Did it come after? The answer is that socialism and sexuality were at the core of the debate on feminism in Sweden at the end of the 19th century. While the argument for early feminists was grounded in religion, the question of morality became the crux of the debate on the woman question in the late 19th century. A morality debate, or sedlighetsdebatt in Swedish, took place in the 1880s in Sweden and the Nordic countries, through newspapers especially, but also in discussion forums, in public spaces, via books and the theatre. It focused on marital duty and sexuality, and the fact that men were freer than women to have sexual relationships before marriage. It was a very modern debate, in fact, that took place at this time. So why were women supposed to be virgins when men could do whatever they wanted before marriage? And at the core was the problem of prostitution. And social class positioning was a direct consequence of these discussions, as of course prostitution would be the plague of the working class or poorer people, whereas the bourgeois would have, they would be less close to this kind of issue. Let's start with the periodicals. So this is the first one, Tidskrift för hemmet, published between 1859 and 1885. The early Swedish feminism, which was advocated by Fredrika Bremer, whom you see in purple here on the slide. And she was followed by the editors of Tidskrift för hemmet, whom you see in green, Sofie Adlersparre, and in yellow, Rosalie Olivkrona. It was firmly rooted in the Lutheran tradition, so very close to religion, as I mentioned. And this religious take asserts that at creation, God destined the sexes to complete one another, and not necessarily in the sense that women were to be subjected to men. In fact, it was a form of liberal theology in which personal freedom supports women's emancipation. Women ought to be emancipated and free in order to serve their household better, to help in the house, to help in the education of their children, and to help their husbands. So this form of thinking also encouraged women's emancipation because it was an asset for the country's development. Sweden was a very poor country at the time, and the fact that women would work and so generate income was much better for the Swedish economy. This is a very solid idea which accompanied the growth of feminism in Sweden. And so this view was defended by Tidskrift för hemmet, which was the first Scandinavian feminist periodical. So I've already mentioned the editors, the source of inspiration behind Fredrika Bremer, and the periodical was modeled on the English Women's Journal, which was the leading feminist journal in Britain at the time. And the ideas which Adlersparre and Olivkrona developed their own thoughts came mostly from French philosophy, French ideas on education, for instance, Rousseau or Aimé Martin, and also quite a few much more recent works which came from England on women's work and their happiness because they were working, written, for instance, by Barbara Smith Bodichon in 1857. And these were integrated in the thoughts that the two editors put in the first issues of Tidskrift för hemmet and really built their feminist take upon these ideas. They were a little bit different, both of them. I have already published some work on this journal, which shows that there was a kind of constructive conflict happening between the more radical Adlersparre and the more conservative Olivkrona. Whereas the first one was more in favor of work for women and going out there and acting for women's welfare, having them get an income. Olivkrona wasn't against it, but she thought that the household was more important. So it was really a question of priorities. They had different priorities in their take on feminism. And this made for a very constructive debate within the pages of Tidskrift because it matched different public opinions. And so people could participate in these debates and give their own opinion. Adlersparre was not only a journalist, She was also an activist, and she also opened schools for girls. She created the Swedish Red Cross, and she also opened workplaces, copy editing office to offer women work. And just generally speaking, this periodical was really the feminist market leader for 3 decades of its publication. In fact, between 59 and 85, there were no other feminist journals on the market. So they were alone, and they sallied forth, they gave their opinion, they constructed their views, and this was really the very strong beginning of Swedish and Nordic feminism. But in the 1880s, as you remember, there was the morality debate. And in 1886, Framåt was published, and Framåt was a fierce opponent to the opinions of Tidskrift. It was feminist, but it was socialist. It had a very different take on the situation, radical left-wing. You have the editors here, Alma Åkermark, who's in purple, and Matilda Hedlund, co-editor, in green. And Framåt was backed by the Gothenburg Women's Society, an association of women who would discuss issues, feminist issues. And Framåt was the written organ of the society. This system of having associations and then written organs became very common in northern countries, Germany as well. Tidskrift was a little bit different in this sense because it was created first, and then came what is now still in existence, the Fredrika Bremer Association, which Adelsbar in fact launched in 1884, so a year before the journal was not edited anymore. But after Tidskrift, there were other periodicals which came directly from the same source, which were called Dagny and then Herta. And these 2 periodicals were linked to the Fredrika Bremer Association, so the same school of thought. So getting back to Framåt, we had the Gothenburg Women's Society, Göteborgs Kvinnoförening, and this was a social gathering, which was radical left-wing. And so to make these discussions accessible to the working classes whom they wanted to represent, so middle working classes, they sold this journal at a very low price and also practiced open discussions, something that Tidskrift also did. So because of this, people could participate in the debates, and so they could keep close touch with their public. And so it was a fierce opposition to Sophie Adelsbar. There were much more provocative views and sometimes more controversial than, than constructive. So it did not last very long, Framåt, only 4 years, from 1886 to 1889. But sorry, it did instigate a type of social feminism, and it branched out into many different opinions, which were much more socialist, a different take on feminism. And so this has become far more spread in Swedish society up till today. I'm not saying that there are no more followers of Bremer's initiative, on the contrary, but it was a bit more of a struggle, especially for Adelsbar at the time, who had been the uncontested leader of the movement for many years. She actually wrote a letter to her friend Olivkrona, and this was in the late 1880s. So there were 2 old ladies at the time. And she writes to her friend, "Oh gosh, we're probably a little bit old now, and we have lost touch with the younger generation and what they actually think now about feminism." So this really shows this evolution which happened then. Right, I'm going to open the periodicals now in my second part. These are really snapshots of content. What was happening in these periodicals? What were the articles? Unfortunately, I can only give you these small snapshots with one example for each. So this is Tidskrift för hemmet, the first one, and I've selected an article from the 1861 second issue, which is entitled Mötet i Dublin. So this is a meeting in Dublin. And it's a report on the 5th summit of the National Association for the Promotion of Social Science. So one of these annual meetings of people who were forwarding ideas on women's emancipation, what could be done in society to make their to bring forward their claims and to make their life better, matters of education, work, happiness, everything that concerned women. So a very active movement at the time. So here we had both men and women. And in this meeting in Dublin in 1861, Adlesbar Olivkrona and Olivkrona's husband were present, and Adlesbar comments on this meeting. She names all these people who are taking part in it, and she expresses great admiration for the ladies, the English ladies especially, and the Irish ones as well, who would step forth and speak of what their concerns were, how they wanted to change society. I've given you a smaller, rather larger picture of a passage here, which shows you this difference between the Swedes and the English at the time. So she says here, so for Swedish people, this was very unusual to see ladies who were sort of demonstrating and speaking in front of several hundreds of people, and especially who could interact with men in such an easy way. But this feeling that she had of surprise was rapidly changing into admiration for their courage at standing up like this. And this is something that Adlesbar greatly admired, and what she did herself in Sweden after she had witnessed it abroad. So here we have 1861, Adlesbar Olivkrona looking at foreign women, foreign men as well, advocating rights for women and saying, hey, we have to do this for our country. This is great. Let's emulate them. Let's do the same thing. Now we are 30 years forward in time. We have Framåt. This is the first issue. So the first issue was probably, it was more assertive, wanted to really bring forward new ideas and different takes on Swedish feminism. And I've chosen here a play review, a review on a play, which was a French play, Denise, by French author Alexandre Dumas fils, which came out in Paris in 1885, and it came to Stockholm. So it's entitled Denise in Stockholm. And we have our critic, who was called, they were called Passepartout, the author of the article, so a French name, French-sounding nickname. And so Passepartout is criticizing this play. It's quite interesting to see the difference of opinion that is brought forth in this article. Denise was the story of a young lady who was seduced and who had a child from a worthless young man. And she meets a count, and the count falls in love with her and decides to marry her, even though she was disgraced and had become a mother. So the Swedish critic first says that this was a huge success in Paris, and then they express a lot of surprise at the fact that French people would have these views on society. Why would this attitude towards the Count be so admired? Why is Denise portrayed in such a victimized fashion? So we can really see the effect of the morality debate happening in Sweden. It was a much more modern view that we had in Sweden than in France. Not by everyone, of course, but by the people who were behind Framåt and this whole new way of thinking. Some people were disagreeing with this. And so the critic says, okay, well, maybe they think this this is remarkable and modern in France, in Paris, but we Swedes very much disagree with it. And here we have, again, a little excerpt here. So the poor Denise, we think that Denise stands much higher than the Count, that she should not be trod upon in this way, and he should speak to her in a very different tone. But we are not Frenchmen. Here we say here, we are not Frenchmen, so maybe we have a different opinion on things. So this is another type of influence from France this time, which shows how the Swedes forged their own opinion, differed in this case. So it's not the admiration which we saw in the other article, but it is, okay, this is what is happening in France, where we're going to do it differently. But they still needed these influences to build their own opinion. So this was about what I had to say. So just a few concluding remarks. I'd like to say that Swedish feminism was strengthened through British and French influences. It was developed into different schools of thought as it was introduced via feminist periodicals into the national debate. This is just to summarize the idea that I was saying. And by giving you the larger context of the development of Swedish feminism in late 19th century Swedish periodicals, and 2 snapshots of the content of these periodicals, I hope I've been able to convey this central hypothesis. I could only provide you with a micro-analysis today because I'm at the very beginning of the project. And by glimpsing my day-to-day research, you also see what issues and risks I encounter. I'll be very happy to discuss them with you. Every article, every contributor presents their own views and have their own strategies to forward an opinion. This is in all these periodicals that I'm reading. So I'm piecing them together and working out patterns, profiles, and no definite conclusion can be made at this stage. But there are exciting prospects ahead, I'm sure. Thank you very much, and I hope to be able to discuss this with you.